Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Annie Lau. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. Suspected child abuse cases surge, prompting calls for government to act. Animal concern groups hit out after wild boars in Wong Chuk Hang are put down. And Hong Kong extends booster shots to anyone fully vaccinated with Sinovac. There are renewed calls for the government to step up efforts to prevent child abuse and impose harsher punishments for the abusers and those who turn a blind eye. Child abuse came under the spotlight again after a couple were jailed yesterday for more than 5 years for abusing a small child who later died. Emily reports.
Child Protection Agency Against Child Abuse received 1,264 hotline calls seeking help and making inquiries between April 2020 and March this year. That's up 11% from the previous year. About 200 of the calls were suspected child abuse cases involving nearly 250 children. 20% of suspected abuse victims were children aged between 6 and 8 years old, and the abusers, their parents in most incidents. Physical abuse accounted for nearly 50% of the cases reported. The agency said the corporal punishment culture contributed to child abuse.
Corporal punishments will intensify over time and escalate unconsciously to the level of violence. It is closely related to physical abuse. In fact, it not only damages parent-child relationship, children also learn to resolve problems by violence.
Wong said Hong Kong should look at countries which have introduced laws that ban corporal punishment, not only in schools but at home. She also called for comprehensive legal amendments to better protect vulnerable groups.
We recommend the government to accept the recommendation of the report by the Law Reform Commission of Hong Kong on causing or allowing the death or serious harm of a child or vulnerable adult, introducing this new offense, failure to protect.
The proposed ordinance aims to punish those who turn a blind eye or stay silent about abuse. The maximum penalty is a 15-year jail term if the victim suffers serious injuries, and 20 in case of death. Yesterday, a man and his girlfriend were jailed for 5 years and 4 months each for abusing a baby girl who died from head injuries at the age of 22 months. Ultimately, HKIBC.
A worker has died after falling into a manhole at the Siu Ho Wan sewage treatment works in Lantau. 3 other workers were injured, 1 critically and 2 seriously, in the accident at around 4 p.m. They were sent to Princess Margaret, North Lantau and Yan Chai hospitals. The high-angle rescue team and the mountain search and rescue team were deployed to pull them out of the manhole. Animal concern groups have criticized the new government policy of killing wild boars spotted in urban areas. 7 of the animals were subdued and euthanized in Wong Chuk Hang last night. Grace Ma reports.
Calm returned to Sham Wan Road in Wong Chuk Hang a day after 7 wild boars were put down under the government's new capture and kill policy. Staff from the Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation Department used bread to lure 2 boars spotted on a hill last night. A vet used dart guns to tranquilize them before they were removed and euthanized. More bread was laid down to attract another 5 boars, which met the same fate. A member of the Hong Kong Wild Boar Concern Group protested by dashing towards the animals, but was taken away by police. The man cautioned that other animals could find themselves on the government's target list, but he said his group agrees that people should stop feeding animals in the wild. This man, who works near the site where the animals were shot, said they rarely roamed in the area and only came out in a large group because of the bread. He questioned why they were culled. Another worker, however, sided with the government, saying the animals were a nuisance to passers-by. The government said the new policy was to prevent wild boars from injuring people. This woman thought it was cruel to kill the boars as they didn't attack anyone. That sentiment was echoed by the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. The SPCA condemned the new policy and said wildlife should be managed by non-lethal means. Grace Ma, HKIBC.
A taxi driver has been killed in a head-on collision with a car in Yunlong. Footage circulating online showed the crash, which happened at around 6 a.m. on Kam Tin Road near the Po Tay Road intersection. The taxi driver, who was a former policeman, was trapped in his cab and had to be freed by firefighters. The 57-year-old was taken to Pokoi Hospital, where he died. The 21-year-old driver of the car was injured and was later arrested for drunk driving. His female passenger was also hurt and sent to Tuen Mun Hospital. A delivery worker has accused Foodpanda of failing to compensate him for an injury he suffered while working. Other workers, meanwhile, held what they said was their last meeting with the management to resolve their dispute with the company. Grace Ma reports.
Delivery workers who have been taking industrial action went to Foodpanda's headquarters in Shenwan for their second meeting with the company. Before walking into the negotiations, their representatives said the session would be their last.
Actually, we also don't want to have a strike because this is our company and we are also partner. So we don't want to any damage to company, but we want for our rights.
The couriers have 5 demands, including a minimum wage and calculating their income based on the actual distance of a delivery route instead of a linear estimate. Another worker, meanwhile, accused Foodpanda of shirking his responsibilities by not paying his medical expenses for an injury incurred during work. Accompanied by the Federation of Trade Unions President Stanley Ng, Po, who is in his 50s, said he was hit by a car while delivering food on a bicycle. He required surgery and had to stay in hospital after fracturing his arm. But he had to shoulder all medical expenses because Foodpanda would not acknowledge him as an employee. The FTU urged the Labor Department to establish a clear employment relationship for workers and tighten surveillance on e-service platforms. Grace Ma, HKIBC.
Anyone who has received 2 doses of Sinovac within the past 6 months can get a booster shot against COVID from Tuesday. Previously, the 3rd jab was reserved for specific groups, such as the elderly and chronically ill patients. People who have been fully vaccinated with BioNTech will not qualify for a 3rd jab unless they are in the priority groups. Hong Kong, meanwhile, logged 4 imported cases. All of them carried a mutant variant. They have been to Singapore, Germany, Portugal, Britain, Pakistan, and the United Arab Emirates. Cathay Pacific has sacked 3 cargo pilots who tested positive for COVID after returning from Germany for a serious breach of the airline's overseas layover requirements. Cathay didn't specify what the breach was. The infections forced 130 pilots to go into quarantine for 3 weeks. The airline urged the government to review the decision, which officials admit has had an impact on the Hong Kong economy. The specter of another COVID wave this winter is haunting several countries, with some reinstating tight restrictions. Infections are rising, with South Korea and Germany registering record increases in daily cases. Johanna Chan reports.
The number of new COVID cases in South Korea hit a record high of 3,292 today, following its decision to live with the virus. Officials had predicted an increase after relaxing social distancing measures when the vaccination rate reached 70% earlier this month. The authorities were on heightened alert today, as more than 500,000 students took their university entrance exams. Germany is battling a fourth wave, with new daily infections rising above 60,000 for the first time since the pandemic began. Health authorities reported 65,000 infections. About 12,000 troops are on standby to help overburdened clinics. Chancellor Angela Merkel is meeting all 16 state premiers tonight in a desperate bid to bring the crisis under control. In Russia, COVID deaths reach a new high of 1,247 in the past 24 hours, with another 36,600 infections, as Moscow tries to increase the vaccination rate. Lawmakers who have not been vaccinated may be denied entry to parliament. In Slovakia, people were furious over plans to ban the unvaccinated from non-essential stores, shopping malls, gyms, pools, and hotels. Protests, too, could be outlawed if legislators approve the proposals. Belgium tightened restrictions to avoid a lockdown. Starting Saturday, anyone aged 10 or older must wear masks, even in indoor venues, while people must work from home for 4 days a week until mid-December. Johanna Chan, HKIBC.
And coming up after the break. Germany calls for humanitarian aid to be given to migrants trapped on the border between Poland and Belarus.